Hello, everyone. My name is Atia Tahiri. I am just displaying my visual. I'm currently wearing a gray collar shirt, and I have black hair and eyes. My pronouns are she and her. I am just introducing myself. I'm currently a PhD candidate in electrical and computer engineering, I'm nearing my completion of PhDs. And today I am honored to present a research paper which was already also accepted in IEEE VR in this year and on the virtual and the experience of working for a lifelong virtual user in virtual reality. And I conducted this alongside my colleague, Arthur Caetano, with whom I shared this joint first authorship for this paper, and our advisor, Professor Misha Sora at the Human AI Integration Lab at UC Santa Barbara. In this talk, I will cover three main areas. Initially, I begin with an introduction to our studies, background, and goals. And then I will discuss our VR system design and research methodology and conclude with our takeaways and thoughts on the future directions. So let's get started without further ado. For most people, walking is just part of everyday lives, but for some, it's not an option. Virtual reality changes that, and not by focusing on what's missing, but by opening up new horizons and possibilities. Imagine just for a second you step into a world where walking is something completely new to you, something you've never experienced before. Virtual reality allows you to explore new environments, discover new wonders, and experience the thrill mobility, the thrill of mobility in a way that was previously impossible. As we look into the background, let's acknowledge that VR is often used to simulate walking for people who are recovering from injuries or like dealing with medical conditions, like people who had like a stroke or a spinal cord injuries, so they can use VR to practice walking again in a safe and controlled environment, which that's really cool, and it's been shown to be really super helpful for the rehabilitation. But there's something that we noticed a big gap in this like research. What about people who never worked at all like before in their life? Maybe like they were born with a, for example, condition that makes it impossible for them to work. However, like in any case, they have developed a mental model of working by observing others, by observing others when they were working. But do we really know if it's actually the same, like the same as like experience in working? So we don't know that. So that's the missing piece raises, which is like that's the missing piece, which raises a significant challenge in designing like VR simulation that going to be like to feel realistic to them. Like how do you really recreate sensation of something that someone has never felt before? Like determining which design parameters to consider in order to match the virtual experience to the idea of working is something that is very tough, but also it's very important. Like if we could get it right, like we could open up really new possibilities for people who have never worked. So our goal is really to meet this challenge, which I like to share what we did and what we have learned and this. Before I dive into our work, I like to share a bit about about myself. At around 1 year old, I was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, a motor neuron disease, which affects the muscles which are responsible for movement. As a result, I've never experienced walking or standing in a way that most people do. However, I believe VR has immense potential, not necessarily to replace my physical experiences that I've never had, but to discover entirely new dimensions of movement. So please note in this that in this exploration we were not attempting to fix any physical reality. Just this is something that is important to keep in mind, that we are rather expanding the spectrum of experiences that can be lived and felt. So VR becomes more like a tool, more than just sorry, it's more than a tool. It's just like a bridge to an imaginable and altering the concept of a limitation is into one of the limitless possibilities in here. And this is the picture on the right side. This is a picture of me wearing the headset, the VR headset. In developing our VR working system, we adopted a user-centered design process that put me as the sole participant at the forefront of the design journey. Over the course of 9 iterations, we completed 9 iterative cycles, with me providing the direct feedback and guidance to ensure the system meet my needs and the needs of individuals like me with similar situations and experiences. To complement this approach, we utilize a diary method to capture my emotional and perceptual responses to each iteration. Like this diary entries offer a genuine and personal account of my real experience, which allowed us to fine-tune the design based on my first-hand experience and impressions. Importantly, we identified that adjusting parameters related to the working experience was really critical. To successive iterations, we added and refined various features, including voice commands, head oscillations, sound effects, and animations, until the simulation felt just authentic and immersive for me. When we were designing our system, we started with a very basic working scenario, like navigating hills, avoiding trees. On the right, you see a demo of our experimental system, which you can watch as I speak. To ensure the accessibility, we also integrated a voice controlled interaction method, which because I am unable to use handheld controllers due to my my disabilities. Through 9 iterative cycles of design and testing, we refined the system with significant enhancement, like voice recognition, made navigation more intuitive, while the introduction of a virtual avatar provided a sense of physical embodiment. And we didn't stop there also. Auditory feedback, with footsteps, was also synchronized to visual cues, and adjustable brightness speeds also were implemented, which gave me as a user the autonomy to explore at my own pace. Head oscillations, also another feature associated with working, was also added and made adjustable also. Ultimately, the final system we created offered more than just a static simulation. It enables users, including myself, to personalize the working experience by adjusting the associated parameters. Uh, in analyzing the data that we gathered from our viewer study, we utilize a comprehensive approach consisting of a trajectory analysis, a thematic analysis, and a sentiment analysis. In the trajectory analysis, we tried the virtual path I took over the iterations, observing how the environment was explored and interacted with this data, which while like isolation detail is more than just numbers, it's like it tells us a story of discovery and experience in a new world. As you can see, the longest iteration time was 26 minutes, and the longest stance I wrote during only one iteration was like 1.18 kilometers, which is considered really rather substantial for just a study session. As part of our thematic analysis, we explored the core and like the emotional core of the VR experience. We coded the diary entries and derived a set of key themes which provided a quantified look at which aspects were most dominant. Emotional engagement took the lead, highlighting how the VR adventure affected my emotions. And following that, there were like themes around agency and control and the embodiment and presence, which also played significant roles in shaping their virtual experience. To give you like a first hand sense of the visual experience from my perspective, I like to share some of the personal reflections that stood out in our thematic analysis. My first entry into virtual writing was like mixed with excitement and touch of fear, reflecting like the pioneering spirit of the experiment for like the mental model of working. There was like a need for some fine tuning as the initial mismatch in auditory and visual cues that the experience highlighted like the complexity of replicating physical experience in virtual settings, and especially like for someone who doesn't have any prior writing experience, and I just knows everything by watching others. User interface and control also was fundamental. The challenges with some of the voice commands not being correctly recognized by the system over the first iterations, and having like we had like to select alternative commands showed the like importance of developing precise interaction mechanism, which this challenge that we had addressed in later sessions or iterations. As the embodiment and presence is the basis for like the immersion, by the third iteration, I was able to see my own, which like, I was able to see my own legs moving in VR, like confirm the significance of visual feedback for embodiment. Like as the iterations advanced, and the feeling of like truly working, like I could, like, it was developed in my mind that it amplified the sense of presence like within the virtual environment for me. As the study progressed, improvement in voice recognition and the introduction of like speed control significantly enhanced my sense of agency. Like previously, I was like feeling that I was sitting in my wheelchair and someone that was pushing it, but which it was like giving me a sense of monotony during like the rather long distance, but adding this control, it was like positively impacted my sense of agency. Lastly, despite the immersive working and continuous turning, which often induces cyber sickness, which is a common concern really in virtual reality, uh, this discomfort was really surprisingly absent, which ensured a comfortable experience throughout the iterations. The interests that I shared here, they not just represent personal reflections, they also illustrate how VR has the potential to impact the user experience and like to make the impossible possible. Um, Sentiment analysis provided the quantitative dimensions, while qualitative findings we utilize Distelbert to evaluate the sentiment score. This graph illustrates the fluctuations in the key sentiments which correlate with specific events during the system's evolution. For example, you'll notice a spike in joy corresponding with successful refinements of the system, which increase the satisfaction. In contrast, the moments of frustrations due to the initial technical challenges that are like there were some widespread dips in the positive sentiments here. Later, a lexicon and rule-based sentiment analysis tools also helped us to quantify the emotional tone from the diary entries. The Vedic graph here shows the variance of the positive, neutral, and negative, and compounds sentiments over the different iterations. On the other hand, on the right side, we use TextFlop, which provides a simplified text processing service to assess the polarity and subjectivity in capturing the shift in emotional depth and personal perspective. Like these both tools serve as as instrumental lenses, providing different angles on the and my reaction and interactions with the VR system across the iterations. As we conclude, it's crucial to acknowledge the limitations of our study. Our findings, while informative, are based on just one single participant, which inherently limits the ability to generalize these insights into a wider population to validate and build upon our findings. Involving a diverse range of participants with different mobility impairments is also essential, which they would provide a broader perspective and help identify the varying needs of users. Furthermore, exploring additional sensory feedback mechanisms like haptic feedback could also offer more layers of interaction and emergence. I think there's a repeated the slide here. Taking a step back, the takeaway from our project are summarized into three core ideas. First is the importance of personalization in VR, like especially for individuals with congenital motor impairments. Secondly, aligning VR parameters with users' mental models is very essential, especially when they have not really experienced the simulated scenario in their real life. And finally, we affirm the potential of VR as a powerful medium that can enhance life experience for everyone. VR is not a tool for entertainment, but it's just a technology that can overcome physical barriers and broaden the horizons for users. like offering them a new ways to experience the world. So here, like each point that I spend here not only represents a step in our path, but also marks a path forward to the future of like inclusive VR design. Thank you so much for your attention and interest. And this is the QR code to our paper. And I welcome any question. I don't know if we have time for question, but
we've got a minute or two. Thank you so much for Atiye for presenting here. I'm gonna swap over to the Zoomer so you can see real quick everybody out in the audience, because I know we don't have that on the Zoom, so everybody can wave and say hi here. Atiye, can you see that?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what helped? If I started my video. There we go.
Awesome.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, do we have any questions for Atiye? On the Zoom or in person here? Zoom question. Use a mic.
Is there an intersection here between this walking simulation and the earlier presentation on the benefits of limiting walking-based application development?
I'm not sure really. I mean, here what we presented like walking experience for someone who really hasn't had any experience of in their real life. Because when I was when we were looking at the literature, we hardly really even found any work that considered the users who have who didn't have really prior knowledge about walking, any mental models that they have in mind that they had. It was based on some even tiny experience of walking in real life. You know what I mean? I'm just not sure if there is any intersection with that word. Yeah.
Got it. Well, thanks so much, Atiye.